I'm going to start off with the Muddler Minnow. And so I want to share a screen real quick here. There we go. Not so much to show the recipe. It doesn't have a lot of materials, but it can be pretty complex. And honestly, I think we as fly tyers have made it more difficult than it originally was designed. I'll show you a zoomed in picture of those two flies on the bottom. But when Don Gapin first created the fly, it was actually August of 1936 is what I could find. He was in Ontario fishing in the Nipigon River, where I think to this day the largest brook trout is still from there. But he had a pack of materials or whatever, and along with him, and some of the guides that were First Nation guides that were helping him out were using sculpins for bait, basically. And so he went back and he used whatever materials he could find to try to come as close as he could to a sculpin minnow. His son, Dan, was recorded basically talking about the fly and the history of it and how to tie it, basically. And it was in Founding Flies by Mike Valla. If anybody ever wants to try to look that book up. Before the woolly bugger, this was the #1 trout streamer for quite a while. Originally, it was tied in size 1 to 12, and it's usually on a 3X long hook. 3X or 4X, but I think it looks better on a 3X long hook. So this is a better, at least you can see it. The picture I got was a little blurry, but this is basically how they were sold in the packaging or whatever. And you can see Don did a little note on the back to someone. But there wasn't a whole lot of trimming done, just a little bit at the head. And the collar wasn't stacked. The collar wasn't beautiful. And it wasn't a real dense head. And to me, the intent is to be a sculpin. Sculpins pretty much live on the bottom of the stream. And so the way that they're tied, a lot of, these days with a real tightly packed deer head like that would kind of lead me to believe that it's probably going to float pretty well, and you'd need lead or something to get them down. One of the reasons a lot of people like the Muddler Minnow is it could be substituted for a stonefly in a pinch, or even hoppers, and they're commonly used for that reason. They can be kind of versatile and used for different things. So the style basically that I'm going to do is I prefer to have the collar basically like a 180 from the sides around the top, and nothing on the bottom. And my muddler heads are kind of halfway in between the way the original was and the way a lot of them are done today. I'm going to switch to the materials camera here. Now, the turkey back in the 20s and 30s, a lot of what was used in fly tying was, uh, they call it oak mottled. And the closest thing I could find, I have these little flats here. I don't know if you can see that very good. You can see that they're little dark mottling in a tan color. And that's what a lot of these secondary wing quills looked like. You can see a little bit of modeling in there, but these are what the secondary wing quills look like from a wild turkey. And that's most of what you buy in fly shops nowadays. If you're able to find anything with this, this is another flat, I believe, from a tail section. Much too thin in texture here to make a very good wing for a muddler. Um, but this is the kind of pattern that uh, you know, it's just beautiful, but you really can't find a whole lot nowadays. Um, I know as far as wild turkeys are concerned, there's several different species, and so you're probably going to get different types of feathers. So, if you're somebody like Bill who dabbles in wild feathers from hunting trips and stuff like that, if you can find anything that's a little less striped like that and a little more mottled like these, um, those should work out pretty good. In a pinch, if you really don't have turkey, speaking of Bill Clumper, this is a feather from Clumper's Clumps. Uh, the tail clumps that he was able to harvest off of pheasants, and it's these side feathers on the sides of the pointy tail feathers that a lot of them have this mottled, real nice mottled stuff in it. So those could be used for smaller muddlers, and even for wing cases and shellbacks on some of the ones that we're talking about later on. So for the tail and the wing, I'm going to go ahead and use these turkey quills. For the body is going to be gold flat tinsel um, with the braided French tinsel for a rib, and then deer hair for the collar and then the head. And also, almost forgot it, squirrel tail. Squirrel tail is also used in the wing. Again, if you look at the Bill Clemente is joining. I'm going to try to share that again. I want to show you if you look at these muddlers, the originals, there's a whole lot more squirrel tail in there. And honestly, that's a lot more squirrel tail than I really like to use because a lot of times it'll pull out when you use that big of a clump. Um, but again, that's the original. I'll switch back to the vise now and we'll get started. Okay. That's a size 8. I'm going to do a size 6 just because I want one in a bigger size. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm using a 140 denier thread because I'm going to be working with deer hair. A lot of people will use 2 different threads, one for the to build the body and then a different thread to build that head. But I'm going to start back about a quarter, maybe a little over a quarter of the way back from the eye. And that thread is going to remind me not to go past that point because I want that all to be collar and head. So I'm just going to lay down a thread base here and hopefully not break my thread by nick in the hook point there. And so right here at the back, the first thing I'm going to do is tie in the tail. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so hopefully you can see this pretty good. On a quill like this, you've got a wide section and a narrow section. This is like the equivalent of biots if you're using, these aren't that thick, but it's the shorter side that I use for the tail. And then because it's not very good for wing material, but for those short sections, it's okay. I've got a damaged portion here. I'm going to take that out. And then just kind of look at those tips, and they're a little bit ragged. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this section as well. Okay. So now I've got this shorter section. I'm going to take another hook, same size as what I'm using. And you've seen me do this before for different flies. But I'm going to take the hook and basically measure a hook gap there. And then I'll cut that off and set it on my pedestal. It's better to cut it off than to try to pull it off because you really end up destroying the feather. So I've got that little segment there. Now I'm going to go to the other quill and do the same thing. That's got a pretty good section there. So I'm going to take that hook and mark that off, and then I'll cut it loose. So now I have two matched sections, and can't really do it in front of the camera, but I'm going to basically line these up so the tips are even. About like that. That's pretty close. That looks pretty close. Now I like the tails on my muddler to be to point for the tip to point down. So you see I've taken the dull sides, the concave sides, and pressed them together basically. So now I'm going to take that that tail, and I want it pointing down, and I want it to be about half a hook shank in length. So I'm going to hold that back here, and there's a couple different ways you can do this. I'll do one for the wing and one for the tail. But for the tail, I basically, I'm doing a pinch wrap here. I've got the thread is between my thumb and the feather, and now I'm bringing it down between my finger and the feather. And then I'm going to bring it right back up like that. And then pinching tight, I'm going to go ahead and pull, which collapses that feather down. And then I'm going to take a wrap forward. So that placed my tail right on top of the hook shank. And now I can start moving this with spiraled wraps here. And I want to stop actually before, if I was to cut this feather right at the thread where I wanted to save that space, then as I tie that down, I'm going to actually waste a little more space. So I want to make sure I get behind that. So now I have that tied in. I'm going to take my braided tinsel. Cut off a little section here. And I want to tie that down so that my rib is on the lower opposite side from me as I'm tying, so that when I wrap that forward, I'm not going to jostle the tail. So I'll take that right back to the tail. And then the flat tinsel for the body. So I want the gold side facing me once it's wrapped. So I'm going to tie it in with the silver side facing me. And then I'll just bring my thread forward, just making sure that body is nice and smooth. And then as I start wrapping, that folds over. So now I sometimes have a lot of trouble with wrapping a tinsel body. If you try to overlap the turns, you end up with the tinsel buckling. And I started to actually find out recently that if you just do touching turns like that, where where it's not overlapping at all, but they're actually touching next to each other, you get a nice flat wrap there, and you don't get that buckling. So I'm going to bring it up to there and tie it down. A couple nice tight wraps here. Then I'll cut that out of the way. And then as I wrap this forward, I'm not touching the tail, so that's why I left it on that opposite lower side. Tie that off as well, right there. Now I want a little bit of squirrel tail for sort of an underwing. So squirrel tail is a very slippery material. You've heard me say that before. And if you fold it out from the squirrel tail, a lot of times you really don't have to stack it. So I'll just pull that out and flip it free. And then I can just kind of hand stack it a little bit. I've got that zoomed in pretty far. I can just kind of hand stack it a little bit, take some of these shorter ones and pull them forward a bit. Some of these shorter ones and pull them forward a bit. And that looks pretty good. I want that to go about halfway down the tail. So I'm going to mark it there. And then transfer it to this other hand. So then when I cut that, cut it so it just had a little bit sticking out for me to tie down. Some nice tight wraps on there for that underwing. Now, for the rest of the wing, I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite sides now for the muddler wing there. Got a little bit of damage on this one, but I don't want to I'm going to try to make that work. I don't want to just keep wasting all this to try to make it perfect. So I'm going to use that section right there. Cut it free. Set that on my pedestal. And then I'll do the same with the other feather. Mark it. And then I'll do the same thing. Even up the tips. And even up the feathers if I can. Looks like I've got a little bit more on that back wing than the front one. So I'm just going to take my bodkin and just take a little bit off. That way they're more even. Now, these kind of have a little bit of a, they don't cup together. So I have two options. Either I can put the dull sides facing out, or I could just tie them in like they are. So I'm going to separate them to get them past that squirrel tail. And then first I want to get up here, spin my thread because it's starting to separate. All right, I'll place those wings again to where they're about halfway down the tail, just to the ends of the squirrel there. And now I'm going to take my thread up and do that same pinch wrap, but I'm going to let the weight of the bobbin collapse that wing. And then I'll take another wrap, making sure I go a little bit forward of where I was. And now that's a, like I said, those, they want to spread apart, but that's right on top of the hook shank. So let me get that tied down nice and tight. And maybe come off of that cliff a little bit there before I cut it. All right. So there's the wing. Move these out of the way. Okay. Next, we're going to work with the deer hair. So I'm going to take a little bit more deer hair than what I think I'm going to need. And just grab it out here by the tips. Like that. And now there's a lot of shorter hairs and under fur right there that needs to come out of there. So I can take a comb like that and get all that junk out of there. Sorry for bumping the camera. And then I'll just kind of take a look at up against my fly, and I think I still have a little bit too much. So I'm going to take a little bit out, and then I'm ready for the stacker. Put it in my stacker tips first. And this is going to be for the collar, so I want these to be lined up real nice. And now again, I prefer to have, instead of having the collar go all the way around 360, I like to have it like about a 180 for the collar. So I'm going to measure this to where it goes right about to the hook point. And I'm going to set it right on top. And I'm going to come up and pinch in that hair. I'm going to do 3 or 4 good wraps here. And then I'll take a look at it. And then I can take my thumb nail and just kind of squeeze it like that to make sure that collar goes around like that. And now I'm going to start going through those butts. And you can see every time I go through there a little bit, and it actually stands them up a little bit. And I'll press those out of the way. I probably should have cut some of the length out of there. So I'll press that back. I should have enough room for what I'm going to do is actually take some of this length off without cutting my collar. To make it a little easier to work with. All right, now I'm going to take another clump of hair. Do the same thing where I clean out the all the under fur and short hairs. And then the part that I want here is actually these butts where they're real thick and that hair is real pithy and hairy. So I'm going to actually cut these tips off. And I'm going to come around once, twice, 3 times. And as I go around that 3rd time, I'm going to release it and let it spin around the hook. And then again, with I'm holding the hook so I don't bend it. I'm just going around through those butts till I'm right up at the eye. I might be able to compress that a little bit. And then take a couple wraps here at the eye to hopefully hold some of that back. And I'm going to try to sneak in a whip finish if I can. Now for the fun part. I have a basket here I'm going to set underneath the fly. I usually have it attached to my pedestal, but to the pedestal, the shaft, but I'm going to take some real sharp scissors, these Renamid scissors, and just take a lot off of the bottom here. And then you can see I've got a lot of butts back here into the collar. So I'm just going to try to trim some of those out of the way just so I can see where the collar is. Okay. Now you can also, I've done this before with different things. You can take a razor blade and trying to do it with the basket in the way is kind of difficult here. Kind of take it up at a 45-degree angle and just try to make a that side's a little bit dull. Let me try the other side. And if it's too dull, then I'll just go ahead and I think I was using this for a bass bug. If it's too dull, I'll just go ahead and use scissors to finish it. That's a little better. So with a razor blade, you got to be careful. That comes off of there pretty easy. Kind of straight across the bottom there. And I'll finish the rest up with the scissors. And the good thing is if some of your collar hairs got out of the way, you can just kind of manipulate them a little bit. And that got a little skinny, but I think you get the point. Again, I like to fish my muddlers slow. We've talked about a lot of different spring crappie streamers, and this is definitely a good one where it has kind of a neutral buoyancy. I don't want a big bulky head that's going to float on the surface, but it does give it a minnow appearance. And there's a muddler minnow.
Really nice, Mike. I have problems with the heads too. When I tie mine, they never seem to be the way I want them.
This one, this size 8, I had a little bit bulkier head on this one.
Yeah,
But I did that with scissors.
yeah.
Um,
I think from the tires perspective, that's a little more what we think of than the smaller head. But from a fishing perspective, I think the smaller head works better. But just that's my opinion.
Well, with the bigger head, it sinks slower.
Yeah,
So if you're like hitting holes in vegetation, you you like it to not sink real fast.
right. So for the next fly, the Tellico, what I could do first is go ahead and show the, there we go. The tail and the throat on this fly normally is guinea fowl. You can substitute just about anything that's kind of speckly. You can use different pheasant feathers, ringneck pheasant feathers. You can use just about anything that's kind of soft and webby. But the Wing case on this is turkey quill. The body is either dubbing or yarn or floss. I prefer dubbing, or I have a yellow poly yarn that works pretty good as well for this. But the key is with the ribbing of the peacock like that. This can be a one fish fly. So I'm going to basically use a technique that I think you've seen me using before to try to reinforce that peacock a little bit to where it will hopefully stay in there a little better. This was, I think it was Eastern Tennessee. There's the Tellico River. Um, the best anyone can really find is that this was probably first tied in about the 1920s. But I don't think there's ever really been a specific person to attribute the design of the fly to. But it's a really cool looking fly. I've always liked it, and one of the first flies that I started trying to recreate out of magazines back in the dark ages. So this is Guinea, if you've ever seen it. I wanted to kind of talk about what to select for the tail and the throat because there's different Guinea. I'll get to that in a second. Just use some strung peacock curl. In this one, I'm going to actually use a pheasant tail with that mottled stuff on the, and then I'll use some BT's soft touch dubbing for the body. So back to the vise. I'm going to do this one a little bit bigger too, I think. I think this is about a size 10 hook, nymph hook. Need to tighten that a little bit. That ought to do. I could use the same thread. I'll just use that black ultra thread. And lately I've been leaving a little bit behind the eye of the hook just to kind of help reduce bulk and make my heads cleaner. So the first thing I need to tie in actually is the tail. So I just have a package of mixed guinea feathers, and I had a couple examples here of what I probably wouldn't use. One of them is this real long, larger feather, because out here at the tips, they're really like fine, and they really don't have that much speckling, as much speckling, and I mean, you could use them if that's all you had. A smaller feather would just give you a little bit more speckling and contrast, but I probably wouldn't use this one either because it's pretty much like perfectly symmetrical. And maybe that could be used, say for a cheek on a fancy fly or something like that. You know, if I got down to the point where that's all I had left, I'd use it. But if I'm picking through a package of feathers, this one's going to be a little more what I would pick for this because it's curved, it's misshapen, and so I can pick the barbs off of that to use for the tail and the throat. So I'll use one side for the tail, and the tail should be about hook shank and length. It's usually what we use for a measurement anyway. So I'll tie that in right at the bend of the hook and come over it just to give me a little bit of bulk. I'll leave all that stuff in there. And then for my wing case, if you want to stay consistent, you could do something similar to what we did with the other hook. You know, if you want to tie a few of these and you want it to be consistent with your wing case, you could grab a bunch of trash in there. Grab a hook of the same hook and measure it off. That gives about the right size for the wing case anyway. Separate that away. Now, for the wing case, I've got plenty of room here. This is a pretty long piece of feather here. I want to maybe cut off some of these tips so that I'm not using as fine diameter of barbs there. You know, I can use this thicker part of the feather. So I'm just going to cut that shorter. And then I'm going to come back to about maybe the middle here and start tying that down. I want to pretty much keep it on top of the hook. So I'm kind of leaning it back towards me a little bit just to stay on top of the hook. And then I'll turn a couple turns this way, and then I'll turn it to the side because I'm going to do some dubbing. And I can clear the hook point so I'm not stabbing myself and making my yellow dubbing orange. So even with this soft touch dubbing, it's designed to be used for touch dubbing and use with the wax. But as long as you're using small amounts like this, just like with any dubbing, even with those shorter staple size, they call it the length. As long as you're taking small amounts, you can make a nice dubbing noodle even with this. So I'm going to make a pretty long dubbing noodle, maybe good 2.5, 3 inches. And I'll see if I need any more. Just adding little pinches at a time. If it looks a little thin, I can add on top of it. And I'll set that aside. And, oh, got to tie in the peacock herl. So I'm going to pull some of that back, tie in the peacock herl. And then I'll go ahead and start dubbing the body. I want to make this a little bit chubby. You'll bear with me while I dub this. When I the reason I didn't use the dubbing wax and touch dub and then twist it on, I wanted a little bulkier, and so this just kind of gives me a little more freedom to play with the thickness of the dubbing there. Just a little bit more, and we'll call it good. Okay. Now I'm going to take those two peacock herls and twist them. Another thing I could have done is leave the tag end of the thread when I tied on my thread base. Leave about 3 inches of thread. Leave that tag end of the thread off, hanging off the back, and then twist that in with these to give it a little bit more of a reinforcement. Just keep twisting those as you go. That way, if one of these does break, the other one's kind of holding it down. Let me twist some more. And then also with that bushier dubbing, that does kind of protect those stems as well, because it's down inside the dubbing. Now, first thing I'll do is go ahead and tie in that throat. So I'm just going to take these try to get those tips evened up as much as I can. Those are pretty good right there. And go ahead and pinch them and then pull that feather away. And now going back about to the point of the hook. Go ahead and tie that in. Couple good wraps. And then before I cover up too close to the eye, I want to be able to snip that out of there. So I don't know if you can see it. Some real fine point scissors helps in that situation. That way I'm not crowding the eye. And those are tied in real nice and secure there. Now I'll take that wing case and fold it over. Try to keep it on top. It looks like I did. And then again, nice fine tip scissors. Put those out. A little bit of dubbing in there, but now that's gone. And then whip finish. And there's a Tellico Nymph. I do use them for bluegill. Anything, with black, yellow, contrast like that is pretty highly visible. And, but it's designed as a trout fly, and It'd be a good fly to hang off of a dry fly, maybe. And the last, how we doing on time? Last one we're going to do is a hare's ear nymph. These are commonly tied with a bead. The original actually, again, there's very little actual facts out there on who tied the first actual hare's ear nymph. But Frederick Halford back in the 1800s had in England, 1880s, I believe, there was a dry version, gold-ribbed hare's ear. And so it's just kind of assumed that they took a dry version and just turned it into a nymph basically by changing the materials. I'm gonna share the recipe again here. So there's a picture of the bead version and the nymph, regular nymph version. Size can be anything you want, really. This is really good in bigger sizes. And if you want to fish for the stocked trout right after they get stocked, this to me looks a lot like a pellet. So that wouldn't be a bad choice for stocked trout right out of the truck. It's called a gold rib hare's ear, but nowadays we have access to a full hare's mask, and I kind of use a method to go through there and pick what I want out of there just to kind of make it a good dubbing. I'll go through that here next. The wing case is turkey quill. The rest of it basically is just hare's mask and then gold wire or small tinsel. There's my button. So bunny face, hare's mask, whatever you want to call it. The hair on the ears, you're just kind of limited to this real short spiky stuff right here, and a lighter tan stuff in here that's still pretty stiff. But on the actual mask, all through here, you've got some real soft stuff that's a little bit longer. And so instead of actually focusing on the ears themselves, you can just kind of go through here. And basically, I'll show you what I mean. You should be able to see what I don't make the camera shake too much. But right here around the eyes, I'm just going to just pinch in like that. I've got a little bit of stuff there. Put it on a white piece of paper. Come up to the ears and pinch a little bit. And just kind of move around the face down here off the nose. There's a lot of longer guard hairs and stuff. In here, there's some lighter stuff that's longer, and over here on the sides. But you just kind of go through there and grab from all around the mask, and then you just get this blend of long and short fibers, spiky and soft. And it really makes a good kind of dubbing blend. Now you could go through there and like shave it, run it through a blender, and you'd probably come up with a pretty good mix, but I've just kind of usually just done it that way. So I've got that set aside. The other part is for the tail. You could use like some feather fibers. You could use a little bit of turkey. Some of that mottled pheasant. You could use a lot of things for the tail. But all this stuff around the eyes is maybe half an inch long. and has pretty good markings on it. So usually I'll just clip a little bunch out of there. So go back to there. I'll go ahead and lay down a thread base. This is a bigger hook, so I should be able to use that same heavier thread. All right, I'm gonna, like I was telling you, just kind of go in there by the eyes and grab a little tuft of fur that'll work for a tail. So got a little bit more than I need, but I'll use some of that in the dubbing. So take some of that away. And basically I'm taking those guard hairs, kind of like we did with the deer hair in a way. I'm taking those guard hairs and trying to get most of this under fur pinched out of there. So that's good with the dubbing as well. And so I've got a little bit there that I'm going to use for the tail. It's a little bit curved, but I think that'll be fine. Also maybe roll it a little bit to kind of take that curve out of it. So a little bit shorter of a tail. I don't quite want a hook shank in length. Hare's ear normally has a little bit shorter tail. So right on top of the hook shank there. And then I'll use those butts there as bulk for the rest of the body. For the rib on this, I could use that same, for this size of hook, that might not be too bad. I'll go ahead and use that braided tinsel. You could also use, there's a mylar tinsel that's a little bit finer. There's a few different sizes. This is the small size, I believe. That would also work good. You could use a wire if you have a gold wire. And again, same thing. I'm going to catch it underneath and just keep it on that far side. So that's going to be my rib. And again, I'll turn the hook point away and I'll grab some dubbing. So this is all that stuff that I harvested off of that face there. And I'm just going to start twisting it onto the thread a little bit at a time. See a bigger clump like that and I'm going to end up with trouble. So I tried to spread it out before I twist it on. Looks pretty good. For now, I'll go ahead and see how far that'll take me. Set this other stuff aside. I have a white piece of paper here that I have it on so I can find it easy. I'm going to go a little farther than this part in here is going to be thorax. I'm going to go a little bit further than that because that's going to help make my wing case look the way I want it to. So actually, right about in there is going to be where my thorax is going to start. So take my rib now. You got 3 good wraps there. Cut this off with some older scissors. And again, I'm going to leave a little bit of a stub there and tie that down because I really don't mind having a little bit of bulk up front here to help with that thorax. So I'm going to come back right about there. So about a third of the way back. And just for ease, I have to actually use turkey, actually, because that's the whole point of tonight's theme. So I'm going to grab about that same thickness of the hook gap. And this is a pretty long feather, and this out here is pretty thin. So I'll go ahead and cut some of that out of the way. Now I want the colorful side to be on top. So I'll turn it dull side up and just kind of roll it around the hook there a little bit and tie it down. Nice tight wraps. So now I can double check and look over there and see if that's how I want that to be, and that'll look good. Now go back to the dubbing, and this is going to be quite a bit thicker, the thorax. Bulkier. So a little bit right here in the middle. Guess I had that zoomed in too far for you to see me dubbing, but come forward, go back over it, and end right up here in front of the hook. And then I'll take my wing case, fold that over the top. Got a little bit of junk in the eye there, but I'll try to take care of that in a second. Pull that nice and tight. And holding my, covering everything with my fingers, I'll just kind of singe those hairs out of the eye. Now, another thing you can do is, the reason they call this a dubbing needle, some people do, is this is before people started using Velcro. It's another way you can just kind of pick out some of those guard hairs, make it into some legs. There's a nice shaggy gold ribbed hairs here.
Ugly fly that catches a lot of fish.
Yes, it does. Actually, Most of that, that dubbing is in there. I mean, I'm pulling on it pretty good. But you can pick some of those out and it just really, those guard hairs really make nice legs. So there we have it. Turkey flies.